Ladies and gentlemen, it's 4 o'clock. I'd like to call the 7th meeting of the Planning and Environment Committee to order. Please check the city website for additional meeting detail information. Meetings can be viewed via live streaming on YouTube and the city website. The City of London is situated on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lenapehoking, and Attawandarung. We honor and respect the history, languages, and culture of the diverse Indigenous people who call this territory home. The City of London is currently home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people today. As representatives of the people of the City of London, we are grateful to have the opportunity to work and live in this territory. The City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for meetings upon request. To make a request specific to this meeting, please contact PEC or PEC at london.ca or 519-661-2489 extension 2425. At this point, I will look for any disclosures of pecuniary interest. Seeing none, I will move on to the consent items. I'll ask at this point if anyone would like any consent items to be pulled. Councillor Frank.
Thank you. Could I pull 2.4 and then I have questions on 2.2?
Okay. Any other consent items that committee members would like to see pulled? Okay. I'll open the floor to any questions or comments regarding 2.1, 2.2, and 2.3. And also, if someone would like to move all three of them, that'd be fine too. Councilor Frank.
Thank you. Yes. I have a question regarding 2.2, so the extension of the subdivision. I was just curious, so I think this is the fourth 3-year extension, and given that the land has been sitting in limbo and is just kind of static, I'm wondering if there's any opportunity to work with the applicant to have some native seeds being planted, perhaps around the commercial area, which doesn't seem to have a lot of movement. So I'm just wondering through the chair to staff if there's an opportunity to see if there could be some native seed planting, recognizing not like trees or shrubs or permanent items.
Okay, I'll go to staff on that question, the councillor.
Thank you. Through the chair. Yes, we can have the discussions with the applicant, see if there's some opportunities that they could plant some seeds in that area to help grow in the interim until they come in for registration.
Councillor.
Thank you. And just following up to that, I'm wondering, I think this is the third, fourth, or fifth subdivision extension we've seen. Many of the subdivisions are kind of moving out to 10 plus years of development. The land is just kind of sitting there somewhat uselessly. I'm just wondering if there's any way kind of as a policy or moving forward to have areas that we imagine will be static for many years. If there's a way to, through a policy, work with the applicants to put along native seeds. My understanding is sometimes they will plant oats or something, which is kind of nice for pollinators, but is there any opportunity to have that be a more formalized process where if they know they're not going to build anything there for 10 years, we could ask that they plant native seeds in the meantime?
I'll go to staff.
Through the chair, the intention with anyone that's bringing forward one of these applications is that they will be going quite quickly. So the ideal in all of our situations is that if we allow a 3-year expansion, that they do it within 3 years. Now, the marketplace dictates when some of these folks move forward. So the ideal is that they are moving ahead very quickly, but there might be opportunities that in the future we can include that as part of the conditions that if you don't move forward within this period of time, then once you come up for the next application deadline, then you would take some kind of action related to seeding. So that's something that we can incorporate into the future, but the ideal is actually you move forward with your application on a timely basis.
Councillor.
Thank you. I'm very excited about that because I acknowledge that ideally, yes, they move forward within 3 years and they've got some shovels in the ground once they have approval. But as we've seen, kind of with this being, I think, the fourth extension, it'd be nice to maybe have a bit of a consequence if you don't move forward with this. And then if you want another 3-year extension, you're going to have to do some native plants in the meantime. The only other question I had for 2.2 and through the chair, was the commercial asset in the corner. My understanding is it's not really been able to move forward based on market conditions. And I'm just wondering if there's any interest from the applicant to have that be perhaps a mixed use where the ground floor is commercial and above is residential, given that residential has been moving forward fairly significantly in the community.
We'll go to staff on Councillor's question.
Through the chair, we can suggest, have conversations with the applicant about that. It would be driven by their requests if they want to look at a change of the land use in that portion of the site, but we can bring that up in our conversations with them.
Councillor,
Thank you. That's all my questions for 2.2.
any other questions or comments? Could I get a motion to approve the consent items? Councillor Hopkins, seconded by Deputy Mayor Lewis. And Councillor Frank?
Thank you. Is that 2.1 to 2.3?
2.1, 2.2, and 2.3, correct.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. If there's no other questions or comments, I'll call that vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
So we have consent item 2.4. Councillor Schuyler, you want to pull, so I will go to you first.
Thank you. Yes, I was hoping, and I chatted briefly with staff after this parking lot came to us at Last Peck, but working with the approval authority for indicating to the applicant to have native species, like native four-season species, included as part of the landscaping design work. So I did send along a bit of an amendment to the clerk. So just hoping to see if there's interest at this committee to direct staff to work with the applicant to do native plants.
Okay, Clerk, did you get that wording from the councillor? Is it up so other committee members and visiting councillors can see?
Would you like me to just add it into the motion?
If you could, I believe that would be what the councillor's intentions are.
I've put up the motion with the addition.
Okay, the motion is now put up with the additions. If you refresh your screens, you'll be able to see the revised motion. So, Councillor, are you moving as amended, that motion?
Yes, and I would like through the chair to confirm with staff that that language is acceptable. I kind of wordsmithed it a bit, but I just want to confirm that they're.
Okay, before I look for a seconder, I'll go to staff to make sure that they're comfortable with that language.
Thank you. Through the chair, yes, we're comfortable with that language. Thank you.
Okay, and Councillor Hopkins is seconding it. I will put that on the floor for discussion or comments. I'll give you a few minutes to read it. Make sure you comprehend it. Has everyone had a chance to peruse? Okay, seeing no questions or comments, then we have a motion moved and seconded, so I will call the vote on that.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Okay, so we will move on to scheduled items 3.1. The first is modifications to public site plan holding provisions as a result of Bill 23. We have discussed this coming in committee and at council. So I would like to call on staff right now to kind of give us a brief kind of report, presentation on, the Bill 23 portions and then the implications on site planning.
Hi, I'm Stuart, the sign planner. This zoning bylaw amendment follows Bill 23 by exempting public site plan meetings for residential proposals of 10 or fewer units. Bill 23, also known as the More Homes Built Faster Act of 2022, exempts residential developments of up to 10 units from site plan control. Staff have become aware of one or more proposals seeking such developments. Currently, this would subject developers to a cost of roughly $1,400 and a month's delay. This technical amendment would save money and time for both the city and developers by allowing an interim use for the holding provision, ensuring it does not need to be removed by the applicant for developments of 10 or fewer units. This amendment is consistent with the provincial policy statement and the London Plan. 201 addresses have the H5 or H217 holding provisions that currently require public site plan meetings regardless of unit count. Thank you.
Thank you. I think in this instance, I'll just go to the public first. So I'll look for a motion from a committee to open the public participation meeting. Councillor Hopkins, seconded by Councillor Frank, and we'll just call that vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. I see a gentleman is up on the mic up in the gallery there, so I will go first. You please state your name, and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Mike Wallace. I'm the Executive Director of LDI, the London Development Institute, and you get my pleasure of hearing me 4 times tonight, I think. So relatively brief. I want to thank staff for the report and the explanation of how this was working. We had one concept in mind, I think, as an organization, that this would be a fairly simple thing to do, and it is. I appreciate that this is improves the process, and I didn't understand quite at first, but I do now. It's very clever on staff's part on making sure that somebody applies for 10 and then comes in for 10 later. I understand now why this process is the way it is, and we appreciate all the work that staff have done on this. And this will be one of a number of process improvements, is what we were looking for as an industry, and we thank staff for moving on this quickly. Thank you.
Thank you. Any others in the gallery like to address the committee? Seeing none, I'll ask clerk if there's anyone in the ante rooms or online. No. So I will look to committee to motion to close the public participation meeting. Councillor Frank and motions, and Councillor Hopkins seconds. Now we'll call the vote. Okay, I'll open the floor now for questions and thoughts for staff. Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to staff. I know in the report there are 73 subject sites with an H5 and one other site with another holding provision. And I just wanted to just make sure if the public has concerns, or are there concerns out there, what would that process look like? I just want to follow up with the expectation of what the public is thinking.
I'll go to staff on that.
Thank you, through you, the chair. The H5 amendment that's before you tonight doesn't remove the holding provision for those other sites. What it does is it exempts certain developments with 10 or fewer units. We've surprisingly had a couple of them come up over the last couple of months where applicants who no longer require site plan approval based on Bill 23 now are going to building permit and have to apply for a holding removal somewhat unnecessarily, which creates time and is counter to Bill 23's intent. For the rest of the city, though, I would suggest that most of those will be more than 10 units, and they will go through the regular process of a public site plan meeting before this committee and council. So really, it's just a technical adjustment for those kind of one-off scenarios, but I don't see too many of these happening.
Counselor?
Yeah, thank you for that, for the clarification. I wasn't sure about the number there, and it's only for 10 units below. And obviously, with Bill 23, I appreciate the efficiency in the report from staff for moving this forward. I think we all want to improve the process. So happy to support the recommendation.
Okay, so you're moving it, Counselor? Okay, do I have a second? Counselor Frank? Any other comments on this? This is another implication from a provincial legislative change on our staff. And I just want to say from the chair's position, thank you. I know that things are coming, can come pretty quickly for your staff, and I'm pleased to see how well staff are responding. And I understand the challenges in doing the regular job of the department. So those are my comments. Any other comments or concerns before I call the vote? Seeing none, I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Okay, so we will move on to 3.2. We have the staff's report and recommendation in the agenda. I will look to see if the applicant is here and would like to address the committee. Yeah, so I'll look for a motion to open the public participation meeting. Councillor Frank, seconded by Councillor Hopkins. We'll vote on that.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you, and I will ask one more time if the applicant would like to address the committee. Seeing none, then I will open to the public for any people that would wish to address the committee. Seeing none in the gallery, I will look to the clerk to see if there's any online, or we see none there. So I will look to the committee for a motion to close public participation meeting. Councillor Frank. Second by Councillor Hopkins. I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. So now I will go to the committee for comments, discussion, motions. Councillor Frank.
Thank you, and through the chair, I have a question for staff. I noticed that there are a couple natural heritage features on the property, and I was just curious as to know how they're being protected currently and throughout the process. Because I did notice that there was a berm and then an unevaluated wetland, so I just want to make sure they're not being negatively impacted during this process.
I'll go to staff on that question.
Through the chair, the natural heritage feature was evaluated quickly by ecology staff, and they requested a 15-meter buffer, essentially from the edge of where the wetlands was evaluated on the London plan. And that was the way that they said to basically set back and to, I believe it was an OS 5 zone that was applied.
Councillor.
Thank you, and just to follow up, with these setbacks, I'm just curious, are they then, is there fencing just to maintain that, or how is that delineated?
I'll go to staff then.
Through the chair, I don't believe any fencing has been proposed, but basically the zone line would kind of act as a property line to kind of halt any development in that area.
Councillor.
Thank you, and final question, just curious again, as development maybe is going on, are there site visits that staff attend to just make sure that there's like no building materials are getting into the wetland area or into the waterways?
Staff?
Through you, Chair, there's two different stages of process here. We're talking about the zoning application today, and the questions you're asking are really more from a site plan perspective, and then the compliance that comes with that. So mitigative measures would be installed as part of requirements for construction, and those measures would be built into the site plan process.
Counselor?
Perfect, thank you. That's all my questions.
Counselor Hopkins?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And just a quick question to staff. I just want to confirm that all the conditions, like the holding provisions, will still remain. Nothing really changes other than the fact that we're bringing these two parcels together and to sort of, I guess, it seems more efficient. Obviously, it's the zoning change that we're doing here, but I want to make sure nothing else changes.
Go to staff.
Through the chair, that's correct. The one holding provision on the site was essentially, for lack of better words, left over from a previous holding, which is kind of no longer applicable since there is no, it was applicable for basically the north side of the Veterans Memorial Parkway. But for everything else, it's just going all under one zone for pretty much mostly uses that are currently permitted.
Counselor?
Yeah, and just for further clarification, that holding provision still remains? Or is it no longer in use? I was a little unsure.
Go ahead, staff.
So through the chair, it's being removed.
Counselor?
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? And we still would like a motion on this. Counselor Hopkins?
Yes, I'm happy to bring forward the recommendation. I do think it simplifies the review process and happy to support it.
Thank you. Can I get a seconder, please? Counselor Frank? Any other comments or questions before I call the vote? And I will call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
This brings us to 3.3, which is a public participation meeting. It's a housekeeping amendment to the London Plan. So I will look for a motion to open the PPM. Councillor Frank, seconded by Councillor Lewis. I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
So I will look to if there's anyone in the gallery. Mr. Wallace, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's Mike Wallace from the Executive Director of the London Development Institute. We appreciate this report. I only have the first part of it because it's like 134 pages long. But the just so council or committee understands what we do with housekeeping reports such as this for the London Plan, we make sure our legal staff and our planning staff that we had on the London Plan appeals review the housekeeping pieces. I think this is the second report we've seen on housekeeping. Just to confirm that they are housekeeping changes and that they have gotten back to me, and yes, they are housekeeping changes. There's only two things that I want to let you know. I haven't heard back from everybody on the maps. There's a tremendous number of maps. We're assuming that everything's fine. But we just have to be sure. So we will let you know one way or the other before council if there's anything that comes up that's of interest, but we don't think that will happen. The other suggestion that we made that we'd like to be on the record for, you not planning on having you do anything with it tonight, but in section 16 or clause 1683, and here's how it's stated, a public site plan meeting will be required for the following. And number 4 is projects where zoning has been applied for additional height and density. We think it would be ideal to, as a housekeeping piece, to add the words, above the permitted upper maximum height. So we have indicated that to staff as a housekeeping piece. We don't expect you to debate it this evening, but it's something just to be on the record that we think is a housekeeping change. And other than that, we appreciate the report, and we'll be back to you if there is any anomalies in the mapping that we find during our review.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Or I'm sorry, any people that wish to speak to the committee? I don't see anyone else in the gallery. Check with the clerk if there's anyone online or in the other rooms. I'll look to the committee to close the PPM. Councillor Frank, motions, I guess seconder, Councillor Lewis, and I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
I'll open the floor to the committee now for comments or questions. I'll just address staff with the comment that was made. It's in 16.83. There was a suggestion that they add above the permitted maximum height. Our staff could comment on that proposed change.
Through the chair, my name is Justin Adam. I'm happy to comment on that. So the change to 1683 is part of the terminology updates that were included in this housekeeping amendment, specifically around bonus zoning. So as you know, bonus zoning was a key piece of the plan when it was approved in 2016. However, changes to legislation since then have removed the ability to apply bonus zones. So we've gone through the plan as part of this housekeeping and taken out any reference to bonus zoning. And so the language that was applied here was intended to be simple and straightforward and just apply to applications to increase height or density, which is where bonus zoning would have applied. In terms of the suggested language from Mr. Wallace, I think there's room to talk about updates to the staff recommendation. I would caution against using the upper maximum height though. So when bonus zoning applied, it applied above the standard maximum height up to the upper maximum height. So I would suggest we could include language that added the phrase above the standard maximum height. However, this change that's been suggested would go beyond the intent of the policy, even the original intent, and in my opinion wouldn't be considered a housekeeping change. It would be a pretty substantive change.
Right.
So we could consider language that changes it to above the standard maximum. I'd caution against changing the language to above the upper maximum height.
Okay, so I'll go to committee to see if there's any willingness amongst committee members to make that small change that staff seem to be okay with. And it's 16.83, just adding at the back end of that sentence, above the standard maximum height. Is there any committee members that would like to put forward that change? Councillor Frank.
Thank you. I just want to ask a clarifying question because I think maybe I missed the last little bit. So staff are suggesting what language for that section? Sorry, could you just reiterate it? Because I just want to make sure that what we're suggesting is compliant with what staff are suggesting.
Okay, so 16.83, just adding to the end of that sentence, above the standard maximum height. It's not exactly what Mr. Wallace was suggesting, but staff have seemed comfortable with that language. Would you Would you be willing to move it? Could I have a seconder for that? Counselor Lewis. So we have staff recommendation with that small change. Any discussion before I call the vote? Counselor Hopkins.
Yeah, I think it's been a long, long weekend for me, and I just want to understand the changes above the standard maximum height to the end of that sentence. What exactly are we saying now? I want to make sure that what is being proposed, I know it's not what the Development Institute is looking for, but I'm just wondering why are we changing it and what does it do to what's already
I'll
brought
go to
forward?
staff on that.
Through the chair, so we have standard heights and we have upper maximum. What the request is to go above the maximum. And so what Mr. Adama has indicated is then we're changing, there's context changes to the policy framework. We're trying to work within the spirit and intent of the bonus zone. So it's, we have standard height and then we have the upper maximum. So there's two ways of saying up to the maximum height, the upper maximum height, or above the standard. So we're working within that realm. I just also wanted to mention that we are looking at other streamlining efforts that we're working through, Bill 23 changes and such. We're actually looking at this whole policy in terms of public site plans. So I'm just offering that you may not want to spend too much time on it because you're going to see a report probably May 1st that will change this altogether.
Counselor.
Yeah, thank you for that, because I would like to see consistency, and if we start changing over here and not following through over there, I think it could really create a little bit of confusion. I have no problem supporting this change, but I'm really glad to see that we will be reviewing further all our policies and hoping to see that consistency. So when I read it, I have this, I know what to expect and what wording we're using. So glad to hear that that's coming forward and okay with supporting this. I'm not sure why we need to do it, but I'm okay to do it.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, then I'll call the vote. Okay, Counselor Hopkins.
Yeah, while we're waiting, I just have another question through you to staff.
Please go ahead.
On the review. I know this is the second review. Is it normally done every 2 years or 3 years, or is there really a timeline? I'm just wondering, you know, with a lot of these changes that are coming down from the province, how
Mr. Adama.
are you doing?
Through the chair, thanks for the question. So up until now, it's been done sort of as we're able or as needed. So these changes really were originally driven by the approval of the London Plan by the tribunal that happened last May. So it took us a few months to get this together and in front of you. Moving forward, what I hope now that we're sort of finished with that appeal portion of the general policies, that we can include this as part of the monitoring program. A report on monitoring of the plan will be brought forward every 2 years, so hopefully that will be the timeline for future housekeeping amendments.
Thank you. How are we doing, Clerk?
I can put it up if you're ready.
Is it up? Okay, we should see the. Councilor Frank.
Thank you. Sorry, I was wondering if we were including the language about that small little amendment that we just kind of made on the floor. in
It
this.
should be there. I assume it should be there.
It's part of the bylaws, so it would be revised.
Do it. Because we amended it. The clerk has a question for staff. Please go ahead.
Would staff be able to confirm if there would be a revised bylaw coming to be attached to the report with that change, or would we be adding the change into the staff recommendation somewhere?
Please go ahead.
Through the chair, we'd be happy to prepare a new bylaw, if that would be helpful.
Also, the clerk has her hand up.
Okay, I'll go to the clerk.
Thank you. Through the chair, because this is something that's being introduced at this meeting, I don't know if the planning staff can provide any additional language that should be included in the motion, because I don't think this was contemplated in the notice that was provided. So if there's additional wording that's required because of that, we would require that as well, please.
Okay, so I'll go to staff to see if there's some wording that the clerk has requested that you could provide us.
Sorry, to the chair, could you repeat the question?
Clerk, would you mind repeating your question and concerns and what you're looking for staff to do in this particular case?
Thank you. Yes. So in terms of the recommendation that needs to be before the committee at the present time, I am presuming, based on the discussion that was had, that it would be that on the recommendation of the Director of Planning and Development, the attached proposed revised bylaw, which we would require an additional bylaw from staff to attach to the report, be introduced at the Municipal Council meeting to be held on April 25th, 2023, to amend the London Plan by correcting errors and omissions, update references to older terminologies, and incorporating Council's approved amendments to the 1989 official plan into the London Plan, as well as adding the wording above the standard maximum height to section 16.83. I'm not sure if that's clear enough, and whether or not there needs to be any verbiage around no additional notice is required, specifically related to the change because it's a different bylaw.
I'll go to staff on the clerk's concerns.
Through the chair, the language that the clerk has provided is correct. However, it would be sub 4, so it would be underscore 4, would be to clarify that specific clause of the policy reference, and also to include that no further public notice is required.
Okay, the clerk's going to post the newly drafted motion. Councillor Frank.
Thank you. I just wanted to confirm that making this small adjustment is not overly administratively burdensome, because it sounds like this is all going to get redone in a month. And so I'm tempted to just pull my amendment and save everyone time and money and energy. So I just want to know through the chair to staff if I can just pull it.
Yeah, that's a fair question. I'll go to staff.
Through the chair, that would be correct. We're looking at potentially removing the whole policy 1683. However, while I have the call here, the language should be above the standard height to section 1683-4. Right now, it's showing 16.83. It's all one policy. There's no dot in between.
Counselor.
Thank you. Yes, I think I'm just going to pull this and save, sorry, Jerry, everyone a bit of time and energy, and just approve. After I pull it, I'd like to make a motion to just approve the staff recommendation and
Okay,
move
so
forward.
you're removing your amendment from the floor. So we'll go back to the original staff recommendation. If someone would like to move that, Councillor Frank, and seconded by Councillor Hopkins. Any other concerns or questions? I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. So now we're on to 3.4, which is regarding the official plan and zoning bylaw amendment, street width policy review. And so I'll look for a motion to open the PPM. Councillor Frank, second by Councillor Hopkins. I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
We'll look to the, hold this one, right? Thank you. I'll look to the gallery for any comments. Mr. Wallace.
Yes, thank you.
Go ahead.
One more after this. I really wanted to make the point here that we appreciate staff's work on this. Again, as an industry, we appreciate the city working at trying to remove impediments to the ZBAs and OBAs that are not required, official plan amendments, OPAs, official plan amendments and zoning bylaw amendments to improve the process so that we can get more houses built here in London. Thank you very much for this work on the street width issue.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from public gallery? Any people online or any other rooms, clerk? Okay. Seeing none, then I'll look for a motion to close the PPM. Councillor Frank, seconded by Councillor Hopkins. I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. I'll put the put it on this item on the floor for committee members. Councillor Frank.
Thank you. And through the chair, I just have two questions for staff. One, I just wanted to confirm that the streets moving forward will still continue to follow the Complete Streets Manual.
Hello, staff.
Through the chair, yes, that is correct.
Councillor.
Thank you. Yes, and one follow-up question, and I think this one is just for my information and understanding. So this is an amendment to the official plan, and then the previous stuff we did was a housekeeping amendment. I'm just trying to get a sense of, are these two things different or the same? Are they appealable? And what happens when we make these types of changes?
No, I'll go to staff for that information.
Through the chair, so these are two separate official plan amendments that we're recommending. They would both be subject to the appeal process laid out under the Planning Act, but they are separate and distinct applications. So the previous one we looked at was a housekeeping amendment, intended to just update and provide general changes that don't affect the outcome. This one will affect more processes related to how we implement the official plan. So instead of relying on zoning to identify specific widths, just keeping that all within the plan. But it is a separate official plan amendment. It is subject to the Planning Act process related to notice, appeals, et cetera.
Counselor.
Thank you. And just to reconfirm, I think I have the answer through the chair to staff. So anytime we make a change to our official plan through amendments, it does become, that amendment becomes appealable.
Staff.
That's correct. I mean, there are some specific instances currently in the Planning Act where types of policies aren't subject to appeal, but everything we've brought forward tonight is subject to appeal.
Counselor.
Thank you.
Counselor Hopkins.
Yeah, thank you. That leads me to a question that I have when it comes to Table 2, which is the Main Street classification, proposed underlying street classification. So in this recommendation, we are making these changes that are in the schedule is my first question. And not knowing, so in this recommendation, it is being specific to certain parts of the roads that we're making changes. So I'm just trying to see how this helps council understand the designation of these streets. And I'd like to be very specific to one road. I'll use Bowler Road, which is in Ward 9. When we ask what the classification of the street is, we could be given 2 classifications. So our question really should be specific to the certain area. I just want to make sure I understand to know how to ask the questions when I'm looking at a street and what's allowed and what's not. When the street is still, say, Bowler Road, for instance, but one end is classified differently than another end, and I'm just wondering how that is going to be presented to especially here at committee, but to council to have a greater understanding of our classifications.
Staff.
Through the chair, thank you for the question. With regards to your first question, yes, this is an official plan amendment to change the Main Street classification to the underlying higher order street class, as you identified in Table 2. Then specifically to Bowler Road. So it is currently identified as a main street, and that will remain. However, the underlying street classification, which is the Civic Boulevard, will apply as well. So you will see on map 3, outlining all street classifications in the London plan, you will see a hedged area with both the Main Street and the Civic Boulevard applying to that segment of Bowler Road. Thank you.
Counselor. Oh, sorry, Ms. McNeely, go ahead.
Thank you. Through the chair, just wanted to just relay in terms of the London plan what we were trying to achieve here. And as you appreciate, we have civic boulevards across the entire city. But in this instance, it would be the Main Street character. And as you remember, the place type and the street classification work together. So while Civic Boulevard in this case may be a higher order street, the Main Street type characteristics would come into play within this segment that we're talking about in Bowler Road, for example, another Main Street character, because it would be, you know, offer on-street parking, for example, and other characteristics that are unique, which are different than other places along Civic Boulevards.
Counselor.
Yeah, thank you for that. So next time I'm inquiring about the classification of the road, I am going to be a bit more specific, I think, to better understand the different classifications that we are approving here tonight. So thank you.
Yeah, just further to that, for further reports to us, you know, maybe extra attention be brought to that as we, you know, get caught up in the new language and classifications, et cetera. No, good point. Other comments or questions? Also look for a motion to go with the council, or with staff's recommendation. Councillor Frank, seconded by Councillor Hopkins. Any other comments or questions? Then I will call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. That brings us to 3.5 regarding zoning bylaw amendment for 300 to 320 King Street. I'll look to Kuwaiti for a motion to open the PPM. Councillor Hopkins, and seconded by Councillor Frank. I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
And we'll look to see if the applicant would like to address the committee. Please, sir, go ahead. What's your name? And you have 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, committee. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you very much. It's Matt Campbell, partner with Zelenka Priamo here on behalf of Holloway Lodging. We've read the staff report. It's an excellent staff report. I just want to thank staff for working so well with us and our client on this. I mean, this is a landmark development that we're looking at in front of committee this evening. And we highly encourage committee to endorse the staff recommendation to approve. We think this is going to be an excellent development, and for the committee's information, our client has already progressed with a site plan application for the site. They're eager to get going on it. Again, it's a great building designed by the local farm in town, Zed Architecture. I think this is going to be an excellent addition to downtown. If there's any questions the committee has, I'd be happy to answer any and all questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just go to committee. I went over the opportunity to ask technical questions of staff. So at this time, before we go to the public, I'll open that opportunity for committee members. Okay, seeing none, then I will go to anyone else that would like to address the committee in the public gallery. I don't see anyone there. I'll look to the staff or to clerk to see if there's anyone in the rooms or online. Oh. If there's anyone on Zoom that would like to address the committee, if you would let us know you're online. Okay. Seeing no others that wish to address the committee, then I will go to Councillor Ferrer.
Thank you, and through the chair. So I agree this would be a landmark building there. It's 35 stories, pretty tall. 318 parking spots, and it's in the primary transit area right along the East Link. So this all conforms to the London plan, but I do want to ask the applicant if he can answer. I just wanted to have some specific questions on just the bedrooms. I do see that there's 1 and 2 bedrooms, but I'm not seeing too many 3 bedrooms. And I did also want to see if there's any way we could make maybe, if there's any possibility for any type of negotiation to bring in some type of affordable housing for this building as well. I just wanted to ask the applicant if he could just answer some of those questions.
Okay. Please, Mr. Campbell, if you would address 3-bedroom units and affordable housing aspect.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And through you, so there are 1 and 2 bedroom units that are being proposed in this development. Those are responding to market demand. What we typically don't see is a whole lot of 3-bedroom unit demand in this specific geographic area. If this was in a different location, perhaps the market demand would be slightly different. But that's what our client, they've done their market research, and that's what they're looking at to supply to this market. And the other question was in regards to affordable housing. Now, this particular building is not intended to be affordable housing that would otherwise be defined as such in the provincial policy statement. That would be housing that's provided below market rent. What we're trying to do is add to the overall housing supply, and that, coupled with other developments in the area, is hopefully going to put some kind of dent in the overall rental rates that we're seeing skyrocket. So not affordable housing for planning purposes, but again, hoping to add to the overall market supply to perhaps bring rents down overall throughout the downtown area over time.
Councillor.
Thank you, through the chair. Thanks for that. Adding to supply is definitely something the city needs. I was just wondering, is there any wiggle room, or any kind of discussion we can have to maybe even bring any types of, any 1 or 2 or 3 units that could be considered affordable? Not necessarily the 80% market rate, but anything less than market rate.
Mr. Campbell?
Through the chair, we can certainly entertain those requests. I think what may be most appropriate is if we engage in a discussion with our client and any council members that may be interested in having that, and perhaps staff can facilitate that discussion. We're certainly open to having that.
Councillor?
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you for that. I do intend to reach out and I would like to have a conversation about possibly opening up some type of opportunity for some units that could be below market rate. So I would appreciate that, and I will reach out to staff and we'll contact you and the applicant, everybody who's involved there, and see if we can have something discussed that we can bring some type of units that would be considered less than market rate. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions of technical nature for staff? Councillor Frank?
Thank you. I was actually hoping to go to the applicant as well. Through the chair, my question was there any interest or discussion maybe for mixed use at the bottom? Given the location, it seems like an ideal spot for having commercial at the bottom and then residential above.
Mr. Campbell?
Through the chair, this is a mixed-use building. There's about 5,500 square feet of commercial on the ground floor.
Councillor?
That is wonderful to hear, and I need to read my reports more closely, but that's great. Thank you.
Okay, any other technical questions for staff before I look for a motion to close PPM? We'll look for a motion to close PPM. Deputy Mayor Lewis, second. Councillor Frank. I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Now I will put this item on the floor for committee or discussion, questions, motions. Deputy Mayor.
I'll move the staff recommendation.
Can I have a seconder? Councillor Hopkins. And so we have a motion on the floor. It's been moved and seconded, and I'll go to Councillor Frank.
Thank you. Yes, I was actually hoping to do a little amendment, a teeny itty bitty one. So I noticed under section B, item 4 is provide a variety of window glazing along King Street ground floor facade to create visual interest and sightlines for sense of safety. And I've never seen this special provision before, so I was hoping to maybe add an amendment regarding bird-friendly window design. We've heard a lot from the bird-friendly community regarding safe design, and windows cause a lot of collisions because birds see them as mirrors and they fly into them because they think there's trees around them. So given that we're already requesting the applicant provide window glazing, I was hoping to see if we could add a little bit of bird-friendly window glazing so that the birds don't keep flying into the windows downtown.
And I believe you submitted that wording to the clerk prior.
I did go up to 4 stories, but when I reread this is only on the ground floor, so I'm willing to take it back to the ground floor. But technically, birds will fly up to 4 stories high and fly into the windows up to there.
Okay, so I'll go to the mover of the motion to see if this can be considered a friendly amendment.
Thank you, Chair. I see this as friendly. I can support this, although I just want to confirm with staff that they're able to support that as well. It is their recommendation, so I want to make sure that that's
Okay,
can be consistent with their recommendation.
Yeah, I'll go to staff to see if they're comfortable with this.
Through the chair, yes, we're comfortable with it. I just want to caution you, though, we do not have standards per se in terms of bird-friendly design. We would probably look to the CSA standards, the Canadian standards. However, it can be accommodated.
Deputy Mayor? Okay, so.
Yep, they're more friendly.
Okay, I'll go to the seconder. Okay, so we have a motion that's been amended, moved and seconded. Any other discussion? Comments? Councillor Hopkins.
Is this just to the amendment? Or is this to?
No, that was a friendly amendment, so we have a motion with,
Yeah.
as amended on the floor.
Okay, if I could speak to the motion.
Please go ahead.
Thank you, and thank you to Councillor Frank for the that slight amendment. I know when I read window glazing, I more or less thought it would be bird-friendly as well, but I think it just strengthens it, and I'm glad to hear that staff are okay with it. And I want to thank the applicant too for being very open to the ward councillor for continuing those conversations, and really pleased to hear of that dialogue and the openness around the affordable housing piece. That is really, really important, and really pleased to hear that we're going into site plan. If what I heard correctly, I'm really glad to hear applications when they're here, that they are moving forward. It's really important, very supportive. I want to thank staff. A lot of work has gone into this recommendation, and I think this is a good news story without a doubt. It is a landmark. I think we heard it up at the gallery. It's something that it's exciting for our city, for our downtown, how we develop it, how we revitalize, how we re-engage our downtown. This is where I can see this development happening. Supportive of the density. I'm glad to hear that there may be opportunities down the road to converting the hotel into residential. If that's a possibility, that this zoning application still will allow for that conversation going forward when it comes to the density. I do have a couple concerns I just want to throw out there. The lack of green space, I think the landscaping is a bit of a concern. I know we've got the park not too far away, but I do think our downtown needs a little bit more green space, parks. And I think a grocery store too, but I know, I just want to sort of throw that out. But I think this is an exciting application going forward, and glad to, and hope that it will be coming soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments? Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm just going to pick up where Councillor Hopkins left off. I think this is a great application. I wouldn't wander into conversion at the hotel. I think that's actually been withdrawn at this point. And frankly, the fact that RBC Place is back up to about 95% of its pre-COVID-19 business has started to show that there's actually a real demand for those beds as the pent-up desire to travel and have in-person conventions and things is back in full force. In fact, I know there was a great turnout last weekend for the Music City UNESCO conference that we held, and the Global Industries meetings the day before. So lots of use happening at the convention center now. So I'm positive that the DoubleTree will continue to see a demand for its rooms. But this is a great use of an underutilized space in the core. And I am going to emphasize to all of us what the applicant actually said. The single most important thing we can do for affordability of rental units in this city right now is increase our inventory. When we are under 2% occupancy or vacancy in our rental market, I once again remind folks that CMHC suggests that it's a 3 to 5% vacancy to even be considered in a healthy market, and that typically leads more towards the 5% than the 3%. So we have a very significant shortage, and when that gets to the point where tenants are, or prospective tenants, are in bidding wars the way people used to be in bidding wars for house purchases, and now they're bidding to pay more in rent because they're desperately worried that they will not find another place because of the lack of inventory. That I think really underscores how important it is, not just for the cranes that are in the sky right now to finish the work that they're in, but hopefully you can get one of those cranes relocated over to King Street when they're done building one of the towers that they're building, because I'd like to see those cranes stay in the skyline for the next 5 or 6 years while we get that inventory built up. So I certainly understand the ward councillor's desire to see some potentially some affordable units in there. I think we always want to see that where it's possible. But I think the number one biggest thing we can do for affordability right now is get units built. So very supportive of this, and I think it'll just add to that vibrancy downtown. you know, the feet on the street, the commercial space on the ground floor that offers new opportunities for retail and office space. These are all positive things, and I know it's been a lot of work for our staff and the applicant back and forth, and I'm very happy to see where they've landed with this.
Thank you. Councillor Frank.
Thank you. Yes, I have a couple questions, but just to preface it, while I don't disagree that supply is super helpful, I think given Deputy Mayor Lewis's point about our rental vacancy rate being quite poor, and we've seen rent increases, some of the highest rent increases across the country in the last couple of years. I don't think that supply will ever directly help affordability. I'd be curious to see if there's any landlords that would say that they would drop their rent costs because there's more markets or more options on the market. So while I agree supply is great, true affordable housing definitely needs to be rent geared to income or subsidized. So I do think the narrative that we just need more supply, while comforting, will not actually solve our affordability issues. And I just want to highlight that given some of the comments. I did have a question for staff. This application I noticed is eligible for financial incentives under the downtown CIP. And I was just curious if we have done any math to see how much they'll be receiving.
I'll go staff.
Through you, Mr. Chair. No, to date we haven't done any calculations, but it's something I can definitely look into.
Councillor.
Thank you. Yes, to follow up on that, I was curious, given the discussion about affordable housing, if they'll be receiving the downtown CIP, and then understanding that under Bill 23, developers are able to have the fees waived for DCs if they are building affordable housing. I am wondering if we've looked into, can developers stack those incentives in the downtown area, given we have a CIP and those DC rebates, or is the CIP DC waiving?
Little staff.
Through the chair, so we are exploring to aligning our CIPs with the new legislation, because the purpose of the existing CIP is to waive that DC fee with a payback of over 10 years. So at this time, we're going to be reviewing that, and that'll be also part of the conversation as part of our community improvement plan review as well. So stay tuned on that one, but at this point, we wouldn't be suggesting that people could stack it.
Councillor.
Thank you. Yes, and through the chair, I find that very interesting because I do think we do want to incentivize development downtown, and we want to incentivize affordable housing. So I am interested to see what the CIP review brings forward and stackable. And I know for some of the funding I've received for home improvements for green renovations, there are some that are stackable. So it is very, I think, appreciated by folks who are trying to make that possible. I had another question, and in this I noticed that this building is at the maximum of 35 stories, which is the highest density we're able to have in that area, I think across the whole city. And I did notice that there's a mention that tall buildings will be permitted when they achieve a high level of design excellence. And I'm just wondering, has this achieved that excellence?
Go to staff.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, we worked with the applicant in urban design, and we feel that it has achieved that high level and will continue through the site plan approval process.
Councillor.
Thank you. Only a couple more questions. Again, reading through some of the report, I noticed that, I'm just trying to catch up to it. Where is it? Sorry, I'm just trying to catch it. I'm gonna skip the one. One other question I did have. So with shadow studies, I'm wondering, is that something we require if it's gonna be of a certain height? Or is that just anytime it's an apartment building, there has to be a shadow study done?
Go to staff.
Through you, Mr. Chair, through our proposal summary process, we circulate, and if we identify a shadow study is required, we ask for it for a complete application.
Councillor.
Thank you. And maybe this is, through the chair, a bit of a personal opinion, but I don't see maybe the extreme value of having shadow studies if we are going to be producing more and more infill and we want to be approving it. I guess, what is the shadow study used for to make determinations? Because for me, like having some shade on an adjacent property is not a significant reason not to approve one. So I just don't, it seems unduly burdensome. So I'm just wondering if there is a stronger purpose for shadow studies.
Okay, I'll go ahead with that question, but we're talking about this particular application. I don't want to get too off topic here and start talking about shadow studies and importance, but I'll go with it on this one. Have staff comment to the shadow studies importance.
Through the chair, so shadow studies also help with determining the impacts of the building and the potential width and scale of it. So wider massing, wider built forms might have longer shadowing in certain areas, and that helps make a determination if the proposed built form is appropriate.
Ms. McNeely.
Thank you, through the chair. It also helps, let's say, adjacent to Victoria Park, for example, and casting shadows on natural heritage areas as well. So there is value for these types of studies, wind studies in the downtown as well. But as Ms. Riley indicated, we look at those as part of the proposal summary in terms of complete application, and we weigh the pros and cons of requiring reports and studies.
Councillor.
Thank you. Yes, I'm relieved to hear that. I assume there was some purpose. I was just curious because so far I've only seen people complain about shading their property, and I didn't know if there was a deeper meaning. And the last question I have is, through the chair, I did notice a comment in the feedback from the rapid transit folks, and they mentioned that they had the units per hectare exceeds what they had planned for that area. So I'm just wondering if the rapid transit folks had been contacted to talk about the drainage area plan, given that it's such a significant increase over what the original proposed was for that corridor.
Go staff.
Through you, excuse me, through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, we've been in discussions with that division, and it's not that we're at maximum capacity, it's that this development is taking quite a bit of the capacity, but we're looking into that. But there is no concern moving forward for this development, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me to speak a second time to the motion. I was just waiting to hear from my colleagues, and I would just like to add to the importance of this application is the parking structure. I know this is a parking lot, and having the parking structure built into this development, I think is very important, which leads me to a question that I have. The parking structure, will it be open to the public as well, or would it be just basically to the residents? I'm just curious, because I do think it adds a lot of value. I know the applicants up there, I don't know, or staff who could answer that question.
So I'll go to staff first, and if you want me to go to the applicant, I can.
Thank you. Through the chair, yes, if you could go to the applicant, please.
Okay. Mr. Campbell.
Thanks for the question, and through your chair. That hasn't been determined right now. We do believe we have perhaps an oversupply of parking, given what we think is going to happen in the downtown area with rapid transit. We have a parking rate of less than 1 per unit. So I think we're going to let the market decide how the parking is actually going to work. If there's an opportunity to provide public parking, I'm sure our client would entertain that.
Councillor.
That sounds really good. Yeah, and I love parking structures. I think I'd like to see more and more, especially in the downtown area as well. So thank you.
Councillor Frey.
Thank you. And I just wanted to say, given all my tough comments, I do really like this proposal and I do think it's needed. So I just wanted to say both to the applicant and to staff for working on it. I think this is going to be great, and it's going to be great for the skyline as well as for residents in the area.
Any other comments, or Deputy Mayor Lewis?
Just a very quick question through you to our staff, Mr. Chair. And I realize that the answer is probably we don't have the regulations yet. But am I not correct in saying that Bill 23 also introduced some changes that impact when shadow studies are applicable and when they are not?
We'll go to staff on that.
Thank you. Through the chair, I would suggest that Bill 23 got into matters related to design as opposed to shadows. So I think that's what you're alluding to. I wouldn't say that shadow studies are completely off the table based on Bill 23.
Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that they've taken them completely off the table through you, Mr. Chair, but only that they're proposing, and I don't believe regulations have actually been introduced, some changes in where they're applicable. But I do see that Ms. McNeely has something to add as well, so through you, Chair.
Please
if we
go
could
ahead,
to her.
Ms. McNeely.
Thank you through the chair. So matters of health and safety, so shadows could be wind, all these factors wouldn't be forgotten in terms of our design. And so those are integral components of when we're doing building and orientation and height and massing and such.
Deputy Mayor? Okay. Any other comments or questions? If the committee will permit me, I'd like to just offer my 2 cents here. This is an incredibly important development in my view. Talk about infill in the core. I mean, this is ground zero. It's going to add 435 units. It's going to change the skyline. I couldn't think of a better place for it. It's right on the rapid transit line. So it's replacing a parking lot. I'm pleased because when I was on the RBC Convention Center board, RBC Place, there was concern that the hotel might be converted to residential, and that would have dramatically affected the city-owned convention center business. That was during COVID, and I think a lot of hotels were asking themselves, the question of viability. So what this tells me is that, being that the applicant owns the hotel, and they're looking at putting up a residential tower of this magnitude, they're pretty confident in their hotel business, which makes me feel happy for the viability of our convention center. And I applaud the applicant because I agree. I think our convention business is going to be outstanding, and I think their hotel is a dominant hotel in downtown. Is going to do very well. I want to thank staff because I know you had to work with the applicant on a number of issues. Parking, hotel parking, because this was a hotel parking lot. I appreciate coming up with solutions during the construction phase of that. And again, it's an indication that London's open for business. We will continue to see cranes in the sky. I might have a different opinion than others about market rates. I think market rates are dictated by the market. That's why they're called market rates, and supply and demand does drive it. Whether when supply comes onto the market rates fall dramatically, who knows? But what I do know is currently demand outstrips supply, and we're seeing rates come about. How we address it through affordable housing initiatives, et cetera, is one question, but it will not hurt to have more units to address the demand that we're seeing in this town. So I look forward to seeing a crane in the sky sooner rather than later. And we get going on our 47,000 unit commitment for the next 10 years. So thank you to all involved. So we have a motion moved and seconded, so I will call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. We are now on to 3.6. It's a comprehensive review of the London Plan. And remind committee, this is terms of reference only. We're not going to be getting into actual review of the plan at this time. And there is staff presentation just to kind of walk us through, the reason for where we're at right now and maybe and what to expect, in the time ahead as we go through this process. So I'll go to staff.
Through the chair, before we start on the actual report that's before you, I just want to give you a little bit of background because there's been some changes. We live in very exciting times, so we have some changes that are coming on. I just wanted to let you know about. So the comprehensive review process that we're discussing tonight, that process is defined in Ontario's provincial policy statement, the statement that exists right now. On Thursday of last week, the province posted on the Environmental Registry of Ontario a proposal for a new revised provincial policy statement. We've reviewed that just in a very cursory way from over the weekend, and just wanted to let you know that the new provincial policy statement does not include the language anymore of a comprehensive review. So that's been removed. We still think it's appropriate to go ahead with the meeting tonight and the process that we're working on for a couple of reasons. One is that the legislation has not yet changed, so we should probably continue to do things as we had planned. And we are very conscious that the work that's going to be done, and is being suggested by this terms of reference, it needs to be completed anyway. So it drives and supports a lot of other work that's done at the city. So it's beneficial, and I think it's still very reasonable and appropriate to discuss that tonight. And any work that we do between now and when the new policy comes forward is going to be of value. So we're very comfortable with that and confident with it. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Mr. Macbeth, and he's going to just go through the terms of reference as they currently stand.
Thank you, through the chair. So further to Mr. Mather's comments, there is a short presentation that was added to the agenda. Much of it was also based on the past PPS and legislation, so I won't go through all of it, but just at a high level, slide 2 does note that section 26 of the Planning Act does state that it's mandatory for municipalities to periodically review their official plans. And so an official plan review does include that comprehensive review. It enables the city to undertake that, but it's really a land need assessment. So there's the element of consistency and conformity with provincial policies in the PPS, but there's also the ability to evaluate how your city is growing. So the final results would still be inconsistent with the PPS, whatever it may be, but there's those two different mechanisms that are still in the Planning Act. Given, of course, that this was released last Thursday, we're still looking at the impacts of what these changes might be. Slide 5 in that presentation, the rationale for doing this review still remains valid. So the London Plan was approved by the ministry in 2016. It was based on a land needs study in 2012. Since then, we have seen significant population changes and changes in the economy and housing, and that is expected to continue. So the focus is intended to be on that land need assessment and then policies that are related to the land need assessment. Some of those policy factors may change, but it's really about the capacity of your lands to support the growth you're projected to see over the life of the plan for housing and for employment and different land uses. If you look to slide 6, that in general terms shows the process. Many of the steps are expected to remain unchanged, even under a new policy regime. This is also work that would align with things like the housing supply initiatives and the municipal housing target. So those actions as part of the project are intended to include things like evaluations for potential intensification. So the capacity of the current lands to accommodate growth within the current built areas of the city. A municipal servicing review, so providing a baseline and then the magnitude of investments that are needed to accommodate that intensification and that growth within the built area and in greenfields. A review of industrial place types for potential evaluations and redesignations of some employment areas to other uses if they are not required in the long term for industrial lands. An update to the city's vacant land inventory to align it with the permissions and land use designations of the London Plan. The current vacant land inventory the city uses is from the 1989 official plan. Again, as was mentioned earlier this evening, because the last phase of hearings of the London Plan was last year. So an update to the vacant land inventory. And then, of course, if required, an evaluation of the urban growth boundary and a potential expansion. So slide 10 there identifies some preliminary criteria for any lands that may be evaluated for a potential addition to the urban growth boundary. Those are considerations like logical extension of urban areas, servicing, prime agricultural area, impact mitigation and conservation of those agricultural areas, natural heritage conservation, and market demands. And then slide 11 notes that the anticipated timing of the review, as it stands now, is this year, 2023, is to focus on the land needs assessment, that land budgeting. And then 2024 would be a review of the alternative directions for growth, which is that urban growth boundary discussion. Again, depending on the final results of that PPS update, there may be further evaluation and there may be some impacts to the anticipated timing, but staff is recommending that we proceed on this basis. Thank you.
Thank you. So at this time, I'd like to open the PPM. So if I can get a motion, thank you, Councillor Hopkins, seconded by Councillor Frank, and we'll vote on that.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. At this time, we will look for anyone that would like to address the committee. Mr. Wallace.
Thank you,
Please
Mr.
go
Chairman.
ahead.
Thank you,
5
committee
minutes.
members, for indulging me again on this very important item for us as an industry. I'm going to be fairly high level tonight on what I have to say. As was indicated by staff, I actually was away all last week, didn't get back to last night at 3 o'clock, so I haven't actually looked at much other than read it through once quickly of what the proposed changes are. I think we have till June 5th to make comments. So just as Bill 23 made changes and then went through the process, and some of the proposed changes didn't make it actually into the legislation, that could happen here too based on the input that they get. So my focus tonight is on what's in front of you in terms of the comprehensive study that's a review that's required currently in the PPS. As an industry, we're okay with the time frame that was set out and the terms of reference that are here in this document. We believe that this review needs to happen now, as soon as possible, and this is part of that process to make that happen. Just a reminder that I've been reminded every day by my members that a change in anything, if you were to assume an urban growth boundary change, it's at least a decade before a building permit is pulled on any new piece of land that's put into an urban growth boundary. At least a decade. And that's if they own the land currently. So we need to move if we're going to get to our 47,000 new units, whether that's through intensification or that's through additional land opportunities within the urban boundary, within the city boundary. I would say in the report, there's a very good couple of paragraphs on the recent growth that has happened in this community over the last number of years. And it was indicated by staff's presentation, like basically we're working off of 2013 numbers. We're well past that, and London has changed in that time frame. And that certainly indicated on the growth pattern that has happened here over the last number of years. We are fully in favor and engaged on the land needs assessment process. From our side, we want to make sure that the process is based on what currently actually happens and not in what the density might be in theory, but what actually has been delivered in London over the last number of years, what actually gets built on an hectare of land in this community, whether that's an infill project or in greenfield. And that also applies to servicing. I can recall being at this, at a meeting here, not speaking to it, but maybe it was last year, year and a half ago, of a fairly significant intensification project across from Fanshawe. And one of the reasons it did not get approved because there was not enough capacity in the ground to be able to handle the building. So just because there's pipes in the ground now doesn't mean it can handle intensification. And that needs to be reviewed so we have a really good, solid understanding of what is actually possible, and that this process will hopefully, through this land needs assessment and the servicing assessment review, will make that happen. Look at it. My last comment is this. I believe our industry, working with staff, working with council, can come up with a London solution to our growth needs over the next little while through this comprehensive study. I think we need to keep in mind that we need to work together to make this happen, or somebody at Queen's Park which has happened in 3 different locations within this province, will make the decision for us and draw the line on the map of where the urban growth boundary is. I don't want that to happen. Our industry here doesn't want that to happen. We want it to make it a London solution, and I think staff have put together a program for this review that is comprehensive and consultative with our industry and with the public to be able to make that happen. So those are our comments for the record for tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Go to the next speaker. The gentleman on the same mic, please state your name, and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jared Zafman, CEO of the London Home Builders Association. I want to thank both staff and council members of the committee for the opportunity to speak to this. Certainly, Mr. Wallace, I think, shared a number of items that we would certainly agree with. The one item which I did want to highlight, it's been highlighted in the terms of reference that the growth projections have been accomplished at this point, and that was done at the end of 2022. I do want council and members of this committee, I think, to be fully aware, and I think we are, both of the significant increases in immigration to this country, and obviously more and more people coming to London. Some of those numbers did not come out until earlier this year, so would have been after the growth projections had been established. Even something like the new VW factory locating into St. Thomas is going to have a significant impact on our community. And so one thing that I would suggest to committee and for council to look at and for staff is potentially revisiting the growth projections that are going to be the basis for this comprehensive review. That's something we have to get absolutely right. And I would say from an industry perspective right now, and we've certainly shared this before, where we felt that the projections in the growth projections were low and certainly need to be elevated to the higher state target, which was presented in the previous report to council. So that's one major item which I think will be very critical for council to be dealing with in the next little while. And this is really critical because this is going to be the major input for the rest of this process. When we get to the land needs assessment, council is going to have a number of potential issues in front of them, whether that is an expansion to the urban growth boundary, potentially, and certainly something industry would support, which is amendments to the London plan to allow for greater densities across the municipality more than what currently allows. Currently within the London plan, you're restricted as to far as what types of density and where you can build and what heights you can build. Even with some of the recent changes from the province coming out as far as looking for increased densities, there can certainly be other opportunities, even through amendments to the London plan, that could allow for this. So potentially greater amounts of intensification across the city as well. And potentially, if that is not up to snuff to meet our housing target, looking as well at the land needs broadly and what that's going to do for the urban growth boundary. So those are 2 items that I think are really critical for council to be considering. The other piece, and as well, and this is just maybe through the chair as a question, right now the terms of reference look at the land needs assessment, the employment review, alternative directions, and London plan amendments all coming in Q2 2024. So just want to make sure that that is a sufficient time and that maybe there's a bit more of an opportunity in between those periods to make sure we're actually landing, or if those timelines are just not correct, I just want to make sure we have that in the right spot. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other, please, sir, gentleman on the right, please state your name and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Richard Zolinka. I'm the chair of the London Area Planning Consultants, or LAPSI for short. LAPSI is an association of professional planners working in the private sector for land use planning as consultants or employees, helping to achieve well-planned, healthy, complete, and sustainable communities. We come together on a regular basis to discuss matters of public policy and implementation relating to the development and conservation of the physical environment. We're often called upon by the city or seek on our own volition to comment and provide advice to help create sound policies and workable procedures in the public interest. And we work well and collegially with the city's professional staff. Our organization met 12 days ago to provide some initial commentary relating to the London Plan comprehensive review terms of reference. We have, as a group, more experience than any other stakeholder group, probably, in the regular use of the London Plan. I would like to present to the Planning Committee just a few of the key matters that we feel should be examined as part of the official plan review process and be included in the terms of reference. And I should just make clear that this is not on behalf of any clients, but is based on our own professional experience working with the London Plan. The first matter that I'd like to raise has to do with a recommendation that is within the staff report today on the terms of reference, that a goal of the comprehensive review be to ensure that the vision, goals, key directions, and organizing structure of the London Plan be maintained. We are asking that the Planning Committee and Council include a review of these fundamental elements. The staff report and presentation has correctly pointed out a number of major changes that have occurred to these various elements which were studied back in 2012 and incorporated into policy, forming a basis for the plan's policies. Some of Council's current key priorities, however, such as housing supply and affordability, are not captured by the 10-year-old policies of the plan. So, for example, the only mention of affordability in the plan's key directions comes as a means to attract a diverse population to support London as a culturally rich, creative, and diverse city. Otherwise, affordability is not a key direction for the London Plan. And that's just an example, but one that I believe, and as a group of professional planners, we believe signifies the importance to actually review some of those key directions within the vision of the London Plan. I'd also like to mention a number of sample policy areas that deserve review. These were matters that came up from our membership. The existing restrictions on building typologies, such as stacked townhouses and fourplexes, which limit the ability to provide lower cost housing in our neighborhoods. Building heritage policies, which require a neighbor to study the heritage significance of non-designated inventoried properties, which we believe is contrary to the Ontario Heritage Act, let alone the changes being made by the province. Limitations on residential development height and intensities on transit routes away from the planned BRT routes is another key area that should be looked at. There is a need to examine other locations for transit supportive, high-density residential outside of these BRT corridors.
30 seconds.
Thank you. We hope to provide staff during the course of the review process with additional commentary on certain policies through that, and we will seek to engage with staff on an ongoing basis during the policy review. I will provide written comments to the Secretary of the Committee after this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other people that would like to speak to this? Gentleman at the top right, please state your name, and you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Crispin Colvin. I'm a Vice President with the Ontario Federation of Agriculture. I'm quite concerned with the comments about expanding the boundaries of the City of London. I was on council in West Niagara in 1993 when London annexed a lot of the surrounding areas, including Westminster Township. That land was supposed to last well into the 21st century, and already London is looking at taking more land from the county. We lose 319 acres a day to urban and non-agricultural development. It can be development, it can be any non-agricultural, non-food producing use. 319 acres a day. We cannot sustain that if we wish to feed our country and our population. I'm asking London to take a leadership role and say, we'll live within our boundaries and we'll go up. We'll go beyond 33 stories. We will change that regulation. There's no reason to have a limit. Intensification, some of the people have talked about it, and I was pleased to hear that, because that's what we need to do. We can't continue to lose 319 acres of land a day on class 1, 2, and 3 land, the best land in the country. 52% of the land in Ontario is the best land in Canada, produces over 200 different crops and foodstuffs for the people of Canada and the world. And yet we continue to want to pave it over. I urge you to please reconsider your thoughts about expanding your urban boundary. We need to live within our means, and we can do that if we want to plan beyond a short term. And that's one of the problems we have in planning. We don't look at what the province or the city will look like in 100 or 150 years. We look at it in terms of 25 and 30 years. We need to look beyond that. I urge you to stay within your boundaries. Think of the fact that we lose 319 acres of farmland a day and wonder where the food is going to come from that feeds your family and your children and your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren. Because at some point in time, we won't be able to do that. The United Kingdom has already got a problem where they cannot feed themselves. They rely on imported food. Don't let that happen to Canada. A 2014 study showed that there were only 8 countries in the world, a few smaller ones as well, but 8 major economies that feed the entire world. Canada is one of those countries, and Ontario leads the way with $47 billion of GDP in agricultural products to the province of Ontario. $20 billion of that is exported. So we are a big hitter in terms of agriculture, and London's done well with agricultural businesses, whether it's Bonduelle, Maple Leaf, the factories that and agribusinesses you've attracted are great. And they come here because they know that Southern Ontario produces some of the best crops and the best livestock in the world. That's why they're here. Don't lose sight of that when you talk about expanding your boundaries, because when you do expand your boundaries, you lose more than you gain. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from the gallery? I don't see anyone else wishing to speak. I'll ask the clerk if there is anyone online or in the other rooms. Okay. Seeing none, I'll look for a motion from the committee to close the PPM. Councillor Hopkins, I got a seconder. Deputy Mayor Lewis, I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
So before I turn it to committee, I'll just remind committee members, we're talking about terms of reference here. We're not going to get into debate about urban growth boundaries, et cetera. It's strictly terms of reference. There'll be time for those discussions. So with that, I'll open the floor to comments or questions or motions. Councillor Frank.
Thank you. And through you to staff, I did have one question about some of the scoping. So I do notice that they are reviewing land needs assessment and looking at intensification as a possible solution. I am wondering if through that intensification, if there will be an examination into how those targets would be developed. So for example, we did hear from the gallery looking at trying to make triplexes and fourplexes as of right in neighborhoods where they're not already. So I'm wondering if those kinds of policies will be examined through this, or if that's kind of after this is all done, then we look at how we meet those intensification targets.
I'll go to staff.
Through the chair, that's a great question, and definitely as we look at intensification, we'll have to consider how that's achieved. Our proposal is to bring forward a report outlining options regarding intensification, and then depending on what the direction is there will have to be some consideration of what the implications in terms of policy. So at present, the intensification target in the London plan is 45%. And, you know, it's our opinion that the policies are set up well to achieve that target. If there's a significant shift in that target, I think certainly looking at the level of intensity permitted throughout the plan, including, you know, key nodes such as downtown and transit villages, but also throughout neighborhoods would have to be considered as well.
Councillor.
Thank you. I appreciate that information. I was also wondering, I noticed on one of the pages that the climate lens was going to be used for this process, and I'm just wondering how staff envision using the climate screening tool or the climate lens when they're developing the comprehensive review.
Staff.
Through the chair, so as a starting point, in reviewing these, only lands designated for urban uses are to be evaluated. So in any of the calculations of land available, the natural heritage features that are known are netted out. And then when we get to that final result of do we have sufficient land or not, and we're looking at that discussion of do we expand the boundary, do we intensify, do we add additional permitted uses, or is it a combination of the two? Then the discussion is what would the impacts be on known natural heritage features and transportation modes and other things.
Councillor.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think those are all the ones I have for now if we're not going to wade into further discussions at this point.
To other committee members or visiting councillors? Oh, I'm sorry, Deputy Mayor Lewis, my apologies. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, I'm going to move the staff recommendation first, and then I have some comments to share. We'll look for a seconder first.
I'll look for a seconder, Councillor Hopkins, and please go ahead.
Thank you. So first of all, I know a tremendous amount of work has gone into this. I also know that Ms. McNeely in particular has been very patient with a number of my emails back and forth asking questions around a whole number of issues. And so I appreciate the time that's been spent listening to some of my concerns around how we review the London plan. I will say, I know we're not getting into discussion today, and I appreciate you pointing that out, Chair, because I think beyond the terms of reference, there are a number of other factors that have to be considered as well. We have new floodplain mapping from the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority, not yet peer reviewed, but nonetheless new mapping that needs to be taken into consideration in terms of land that may need to come out of the built area boundary or the urban growth boundary, because we're not going to be able to develop on it. We also, and I respect Mr. Colvin, in fact, we found some common cause championing some changes to the previous provincial government's high-speed rail plan and the damage that that would do to some rural communities the way it was originally laid out. But I think we also, as we move forward through this discussion, are going to have to factor in our thought process, ex-urban growth. It's a huge challenge, and one has to look no further than Kamoka or Kilworth. In fact, a couple councillors may have joked with me earlier today about setting up a toll bridge out there so that we're charging access, and it was all in fun, but it's serious, and it's happening on the east side of the city too, in Thorndale and in Dorchester, where agricultural land is being paved over for city residents to live in the county and not contribute to the property tax base or the infrastructure base or anything here, but to commute in and out and actually increase our GHG footprint because of longer commute times. So no decisions are being made today on changing the urban growth boundary, changing the built area boundary, what might come in, what might come out. Certainly no one is talking about annexation from the county at this point, but there are a whole lot of factors that we need to consider moving forward. These terms of reference, I think, really lay out a good roadmap to start a really solid discussion with community stakeholders. It's going to take time, but I don't think we should presuppose any outcome at this point. I think we have to be open to all outcomes, whether that is no change, some change, things in, things out, changes to the plan itself, changes to density targets in existing residential areas. All the cards have to be on the table for us to consider before we start to chart a path forward. And I think that the terms of reference staff have laid out for us here will really flip some of those cards over so that we can see what cards we're holding and then start building a winning hand from there.
Thank you. Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and just want to thank staff. And I want to thank everyone for coming out. I really do appreciate hearing all comments and really looking forward to having that engagement with the stakeholders and how we go forward with the review. I'm really glad to hear that we can go forward with the comprehensive review. I think given the provincial policy statement review, I know a lot of municipalities are all wondering, and how do we go forward? But I'm really pleased that we are going forward. We need to go forward, and hopefully we can come up with a solution that's made in London. To me, that is the London plan, and how we can continue. I think there is agreement, no matter where you stand on what side of the fence. We all do support that inward and upward development. It's really important. I'm not going to ask any questions here tonight. I just want to, I'm just really looking forward to the ongoing conversations that we need to have in London as we change as a city. Those things are really important, but being a creature of the province and how we're going to be able to pivot is going to be extremely important. And I do see staff being aware of all this and being on top of everything. And I understand the development community being involved and being part of that process and how we can work together. The agricultural community, I do represent Ward 9, which is urban and rural. In fact, it's where it all clashes, and very sensitive to how we do protect our agricultural land, and just have confidence that we're going to be able to, no matter what and where we go and what decisions will be made, that we'll be able to go through the process. Not only this process, but it really does inform all the other policies that we rely on here, especially at committee. So thank you again, staff, and for everyone for coming out.
Thank you, Councillor. Other comments or questions? Councillor Frank.
Thank you. I just want to add, Councillor Hopkins reminded me of one thing I want to add. And I really also do appreciate the community coming out, and especially folks from the rural community, because we don't often get to hear from you. And I really appreciate the comments made from Mr. Colvin. And I'm really hoping that, and I'm not sure what your advocacy efforts are, but I'm hoping that you and other farmers across Ontario are communicating similarly to the provincial Conservative government, because as we've seen, they are forcing sprawls on some municipalities. So I think doing our best to work with what our staff are recommending for building inwards and upwards. But I do think we need to hear from other communities, not just municipalities, that forcing that kind of process on municipalities that don't want to sprawl, hearing from farmers will be, I think, really powerful. So appreciate you coming out to tell us that. I've heard it, I think other councillors have, but I think that same message, maybe it would be great if it was carried over to Toronto as well. So thanks for coming.
Any other comments or questions from committee members or visiting councillors? If the committee would permit me, just to touch on what Deputy Mayor mentioned. Last week, Councillor Hopkins and I were involved in the first step on an EA of the expansion of widening of the Oxford Street West Bridge. The need for that is because the incredible growth that we're seeing, especially in Councillor Hopkins' ward, but also in our surrounding communities, Kilworth and Kamoka. Deputy Mayor mentioned it's in the East End, it's north and south. And again, what the Deputy Mayor touched on, and this is, I think, a concern that's shared, I look at this as being an example. This bridge is going to be millions and millions of dollars. It will fall on the taxpayers of London. How it's going to be funded has yet to be seen, but it will for certainly be involved with DC charges and property tax. Hopefully some help from the province we'll see. But what we're faced with is handling growth in the surrounding communities, growth where London receives $0, but yet we're faced with the implications of that handling the traffic that's coming in using our infrastructure, our amenities where we do not get compensating revenue from to provide those. So I'm sure that will factor in, but I guess this is my question to staff. Will you look at growth in the surrounding communities? I know you're looking at growth in London, but will you be looking at growth in the communities that are surrounding us that when I drive in those communities, I see new neighborhoods springing up continually?
Through the chair. So each municipality is required to do their own study like this. The growth projections that were passed in December did identify a proportionate share of regional growth that we were expecting of the CMA. Traditionally, that's been about 84%. They are projecting that that's to continue. So of London's CMA, about 84% is to stay in the city. But every community does their own growth projections, and every community does their own comprehensive reviews and evaluations of their lands. There are statements in the PPS that it is to be coordinated across jurisdictions, but we all are supposed to do our own.
Okay, thank you. And so we will obviously stay within those parameters, but I just want to let you know my thoughts, and I think other councillors share that concern, and that will be part of the discussion when we look at such things as urban growth boundaries, for sure. So that's I just want to highlight that. There are no other concerns or questions, comments from committee members or visiting councillors. We've got a motion moved and seconded, so I'll call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. I see no items for direction or deferred matters or additional business. So we have 2 items to go into in camera for. So I will ask the clerk to prepare the room for that. Do I need a vote to go in camera for it? Before we do that, I'll look to the committee to a motion to go in camera. Councillor Hopkins, seconded by Deputy Mayor Lewis. I'll call that vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0. Okay, so we just need a few minutes to, I just need a few minutes to.
Yeah, sure. Yep. Take your time. Yep.
have to confirm that the streams are back up. So. Okay, you're good to go.
Good to go. Okay, we are back in session. We'll ask the deputy mayor to report out.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am pleased to report that after going in camera for 2 confidential items, as listed on the public agenda, these were with regard to London Plan and Ontario Land Tribunal appeals. Progress was made on both items.
Thank you. I'll look for a motion to close the meeting. Councillor Frank, seconded by, Deputy Mayor, he's in. Okay, so hand vote on that one. Good. Thank you. Thanks to staff. I appreciate it. Thanks, folks.